and apparently many of them passed us on the way to the end. As you go, because we're biking along, feeling kind of sweaty, but we're passing. Okay, good evening, everyone. Welcome. I was talking about this bike ride we did. It's first in the list. Here, watch this. Remember before I used to have papers? See, remember, you notice the papers? And people were like, Keith, those papers are great. We love the papers. You show us the papers. Look what I got now. I got technology for the show. And here we go. I'm going to push start. Okay, see, look. I made slides for Keith Explains. And I probably just blinded you all at home because the front of the iPad is essentially a mirror, at least when it's off. Anyway, so there's the Keith Explains slideshow where I put all my topics in. If you notice, I have a picture of two cute little girls because I don't have any pictures on my... I thought I should have a picture of me, but I don't have any pictures of me. So I thought the two little girls was cute in the slide. Okay, watch. Now, here we go. We go. Oh, look, it's the first slide. And it says Tour de Cure. I'm not going to bother showing you this the whole time. I had to bring it because I'm a geek and this makes me cool and makes me feel happy and like I have value in life because I have an iPad. I didn't have an iPad for several weeks and I saw people with iPads and I thought, I am less cool than those people, less interesting. It's almost like I don't matter. And then I said, wait, I can solve this problem. And so I bought an iPad. And now I am once again cool and happening. I am hip. For a minor exchange of cash, I have again become hip. And I will be hip for about 3 months until iPads like iPhones become passé. And then I'll just be an aging hipster with an iPad that all the kids will be like, oh, there's Grandpa. Flicking things back and forth, reading books on his iPad. Anyway, see, so I got... Here's the first topic tonight is Tour de Cure, which is a weird name for this bike ride I did recently. It's for diabetes, or rather it's against diabetes, I guess, technically, because it's a fundraiser. Like, you promise to raise money, and they let you ride bikes on public roads, which you've paid for. Which, after a while, I was like, wait, I could ride a bike on these roads without raising any money for diabetes. I think I wouldn't have gotten one of the cool pieces of paper made of like Kevlar with a number on it. But other than that, I think I could have ridden on exactly the same roads because I know we went past people that didn't have those pieces of paper and there were no cops arresting them or anything. But I didn't feel bad about it. So this friend of mine was like, hey, I'm doing this bike ride. And he said this to me because I spent a ludicrous amount of money on a bike, and it was the same bike he had spent a ludicrous amount of money on. Except he rides his a lot because he's one of those biking guys that has like you look at him, and if he's just standing there normally, there's nothing really that makes you think there's anything different. But if you see him in shorts, you realize pretty much from mid-thigh down, it's all muscle. Like he'll come in biking shorts, and you're like, I can really see the definition in your thigh muscles. And he's like, oh yeah, I haven't been biking a lot. Normally they're a lot, but anyway, he bikes all the time, is my point. I don't really make a habit of looking at other dudes' thighs. I don't want to raise it. I mean, there's nothing wrong with other dudes' thighs. I just don't really look at them a lot. Unless they're a freaking biking guy. Which this guy is. He's like, I'm doing this bike ride, and I'm like, okay. He's like, you want to come? And I'm like, okay. He's like, it's for diabetes. And I'm like, I'm anti-diabetes. He's like, no, really. You're raising money to fight diabetes. And I'm like, that's better, because I don't think you're get a lot of people on the pro-diabetes side. You know, like what we need in America is more fast food and less healthy people, and so we're having a bike ride to try to raise consciousness that people should eat really bad food, maybe a lot of sugar, don't take care of themselves, and develop, although given the way Social Security is going, perhaps that would be a great idea. Like maybe we could get the opposite of we need something that'll kill people off before they've used up the money they paid into the system. Okay. I'm a bad guy for mentioning that. Anyway, so see, he's like, it's in Napa and it's pretty. And I'm like, I could do that. And he's like, it's mostly flat. It's great. Like a lot of bike rides are up hills. And I'm like, I hate hills. Because I do not have thighs of steel. I have thighs of, well, I eat a lot of cookies. So I'm assuming I have thighs of cookies. Or perhaps thighs of grilled cheese sandwiches. They're not. He's like, you'll enjoy it. And I'm like, okay. And he's like, I'm doing the 100 mile. I'm like, I'm not doing 100 miles. I don't know if I've ever biked 100 miles in my life. I've certainly never biked 100 miles in a day. And he's like, well, it's not bad. You get up at like 6, and usually you're done by about 2 or 3 in the afternoon. And I'm like, done biking at 2 or 3 in the afternoon? He's like, yeah, it's like, it's 5 or 6 hours, maybe 7 hours, depending on how fast you can go. And I'm like, it'd be like 3 days. I'd be on the news. They'd be like, police are still searching for the last bicyclist. They've combed most of the territory. So I did not do the 100-mile ride. I signed up for the 25-mile ride because I bike 3 miles a day to work. And so I went, well, it's 10 times further than work. And I bike to work and home from work. So that's like 6 miles a day. So it's like 5 or 6 times as far as I bike to work. And I think I could bike to work 5 or 6 times because I do that in a week and don't die. So I think maybe I could do 25 miles. And then I went, well, you can bike maybe 12, 13 miles an hour. That's 2 hours of biking. 2 hours is kind of long to be on a bike. But I think it's doable. So I signed up and oh, by the way, here's my slides for Tour de Cure. Notice I drew a little picture of a bike in Keynote on the iPad because I could. And it made me happy. I was like, I should have graphics in my presentation, although I don't have any graphics. So I was forced to make the picture of the bike using the couple shapes they have. It's not a good picture of a bike. Like, there's no seat and no pedals. But it's truthfully a better bike than I could draw if I had paper and a pen, because I would not get anyway. So we and after I signed up for it, now like I said, it's a fundraiser. So they're like, you got to pay $30, and then you have to raise $200. And I'm like, what if I just pay $230? And they're like, well, you're supposed to raise money, and I'm like, well, I'd be raising the $200, and it would be fighting diabetes, which I am against, I think, unless Social Security is nearly bankrupt, in which case, again, I am tentatively against it, but possibly for it. It would depend on the economics. I'd want to get accountants involved, maybe some kind of congressional commission. So I'm like, okay, what I'll do is I'll just pay the $30, and then a week from now, I'll pay the $200. I'll split them up so it doesn't look like I'm lame and can't raise money. Maybe I'll use my other credit card for the $200. That way, if they're matching them up, they won't notice. And so then I said, well, okay, so that's done. So I've signed up for the bike ride. And then I got the email, and it said, you should send email to all your friends and ask them to raise money so you can cure diabetes. And suddenly I was like, me cure diabetes? That's an awful lot of pressure on me. I truthfully just wanted to ride a bike in Napa, in the flat, and in the vineyards with my friend, although I won't be riding with him because, again, he's leaving at 6 in the morning. And he's doing like 20 miles an hour for 7 hours. And I don't know if I can do 20 miles an hour downhill on a bike for 7 hours, to say nothing of... So I'm going up there, and I'm like, well, okay, so fine. I'll email all my friends, and I'll ask them to chip in cash so that apparently I have been the one thing lacking in our attempt to cure the scourge of diabetes. But now that I'm on board, they got my $30. They're going to have my $200 in a week, and I'll send out to my friends. We'll see what we can do. And then like $2,800 later, because apparently I know a lot of rich people. And when I send them a letter that's funny, that says, I'm going to bike and probably die in Napa because I'm pudgy and out of shape and want to be fitter, and we're trying to raise money to cure diabetes, and it's a horrible disease, blah, blah, blah. I didn't mention the part about how maybe we need it to save Social Security, because that's a downer. That's a downer in a fundraising email. So I didn't mention that part. I'm like, here's blah, blah, fundraising, please give me money. Oh, please give diabetes money. You're not giving it to me. I'm pretty much driving there to die while biking amongst the beautiful vineyards. So a bunch of people chipped in. So suddenly I felt guilty, because before I'd been like, okay, I'm going to go on this bike ride, but if I feel like crap, I just won't go. And then they've got my $30, and I'll sit at home and I won't bike ride, which I can do. I can not bike ride on a weekend really easily, because I do it almost every weekend. I don't bike. I especially don't bike 25 miles most weekends. But once people chipped in cash, I felt committed. I don't know why. Maybe that's why they make you do it. It's, So then we were like, okay, well, we got to go. And then I talked my sister-in-law into doing it. I don't know how I did that. I was like, I'm going on a bike ride. You want to come? And then she was like, okay. So I am a persuasive genius. Because I was like, it's flat and pretty. And she's like, yeah, I already said I'd come. I'm like, 25 miles? And she's like, no, a short one. She didn't say that, okay? But I could tell that's what she was thinking when she said it. Because my sister, as you can see, I am an unattractive, unbuff man. And my sister-in-law is the opposite. First of all, she's not a dude. She's a chick. And secondly, she's buff, because she gets up in the morning. So she gets up, and she lives in the third room in our house. My sister-in-law is living with us. She gets up in the morning at 7 a.m. I didn't know there was a 7 a.m. until a couple years ago, because I had always slept late. And then one day I woke up and the sun was up and the clock said 7, and I was like, good Lord, there's a 7 a.m. But she gets up at like 6:30 or 7 every day, and then she exercises for like half an hour or an hour. I don't know, because I won't sleep. And then I get up at like 8:30, and I stagger downstairs and drink coffee. And then I go out and get the paper, and then I read the paper, and then I shower and get into work at 10. She's been at work like an hour and a half by then. And she gets in early so that she can go exercise for like an hour at lunch. And then she comes home, and near as I can tell, she's freaky buff, is my point, compared to me. Compared to most people, actually, as it turns out. So again, in her head, I know she was thinking a short one in terms of the bike ride. Anyway, so we hop in the car. Now I have, as I mentioned before, the fancy-ass bike. And she had an ordinary bike, and we were getting ready to leave, and she's like, my bike is heavy. And I'm like, well, okay. She's like, I should buy a new one. Okay. So we went and bought a new bike, and then we put the bikes on the bike carrier in the back of my car, which I bought from Amazon Prime, free shipping. I love it. I went to Amazon one day. They said, things you might like. Here's a bike rack, $70. And I'm like, how do you know, Amazon, that I might like a bike rack? I've never bought bike stuff from you. I think they're spying on me. I think that for that $75 I pay them for Amazon Prime, what they do is they hire a private investigator who just stops by my house occasionally and is like, here's the crap I found in Keith's trash can. And they type that into some kind of expert system, and then it spits out, Keith needs a bike rack because he bought a bike. Maybe, who knows, maybe they get it from the credit card companies, but I think my idea is creepier. And it might work. I mean, who knows? So we strap everything down to the car, and as per usual, we end up leaving like 4 hours later than we want. Because I apparently can't go anywhere far away on time. I was like, I don't really want to be driving at 75 miles an hour to Napa in the dark with bikes strapped to the back of my car, because what if they fall off? I won't notice they fell off till I get there. And then I'll be like, I wonder where my bike is. It was right here. And then I'd point to the back of my car, and then Mo would go, well, it must have fallen off somewhere. So the whole way there, I'm paranoid. I'm looking in the mirror every 35 seconds to see if the bikes are still there, because you can see them, and they're there the whole time. They just bounce up and down a little. And we get there. We get to this hotel. We stayed in, I don't know, 20 minutes away because it was cheap. I looked, and they were like, we have a special rate at the Marriott. And I'm like, Marriott's really a little too expensive for me. I am not a Marriott hotel kind of person normally. And I'm really not a Marriott hotel at $175 a night special discount rate for riders person. Because I'm like, $175, that's a quarter of what I paid for tuition my first semester of college. I can measure almost anything by what I paid in tuition my first semester of college, which was $687.50. And I recall, as a freshman, writing that check, because I hadn't written many checks by the time I got to college, and I didn't leave enough room. I wrote 687, and I had no room for the and 50 over 100 cents part, so I just kind of scrawled it in real tiny little letters, and I was like, why is it 50 cents? Like, if you're a school, wouldn't you just round tuition to the nearest 10? I mean, just, for God's sakes, think of all the time and ink we wasted with that extra 50 cents at the end, and they had to pay somebody in an accounting office to go 687 period 50 enter. I'm getting distracted. I should be talking about this biker. Okay, so we get there late at like 10 o'clock at night, and we get to the hotel, and we're like, hi, and we got a room with queen beds, and I'm like, I'm here to check in, and the guy's like, okay, and I hand him my internet piece of paper, and he's like, okay, here's your room, would you mind a second floor? And I'm like, yes, I would mind a second floor, because I have this really expensive ass bike, which is barely attached to the back of my car. And while it's probably a nice neighborhood, I'm not going to leave it attached to the back of my car overnight here, because I would get up from my expensive bike ride tomorrow, and there'd be no bike there, and I can't get a new bike at 7 in the morning on Sunday in Fairfield. So I'm like, I want to carry the bike into the room, and he's like, motorbikes? And I'm like, no, bikes. See, what do you call bikes? It doesn't sound dumb when you're trying to correct someone who assumes you're going to push a motorcycle into his hotel room like you're a Hell's Angel, which is what I think he thought I was. He's like, this is the creepiest, most out of shape Hell's Angel I've ever seen. But it wasn't. So we got to the hotel room, we pushed the bikes in, and then we went out and ate really ungodly bad for us food at Arby's. We went to Arby's. I had an Arby's roast beef sandwich, which is not good for me, but not terrible. And then I heard this little voice in my head say, you know, you're riding a bike tomorrow. That's a lot of exercise. You should get the cheese sticks. And so I ordered the cheese sticks. And then I thought, well, you could get 4 cheese sticks or 6 cheese sticks. But look, 6 cheese sticks is only 49 cents more than the 4 cheese sticks. It'd be stupid not to get 6. What if you eat 4 cheese sticks and you're still hungry for 1 more cheese stick? You'd have to come back and pay another $4 for 4 more cheese sticks. Or you could just order 6 now, and then you'd have that extra cheese stick if you want. Yeah, I think I ate more calories in cheese sticks the night before the bike race than I burned off the entire bike race. So those things are freaky bad for you. Okay, so we get up in the morning. We drive to the bike race, which is far away, so it's not stupid. Like, if it had been close, we would have biked to the bike race, but it wasn't. So we drove there, and we parked, and then we got in our bikes, and we biked over there. And when we get there, as per usual, there's like a gazillion bike people there. And they're all in spandex. And I'm just in my schlubby little sweats because I don't own any spandex. And then we biked off. And as we're leaving, they're cheering us on. They're like, "You're finding the cure for diabetes. You're doing this." And then I thought, no, I'm biking. I mean, if the cure for diabetes is out there on the road somewhere, I don't think I'm going to notice it and pick it up and bring it back. I mean, that's a lot of pressure. I really just want to keep my eyes on the road and not die. 2 hours later, surprisingly, I am not dead. My feet are really, really asleep. And my butt's a little tired from sitting down for 2 hours in a bike seat. And we get back, and we're like, "We made it." And Mo's like, "Well, yeah." And I'm like, "Cut me a little slack here. This is impressive for me. This is something new or something. Come on, 25 miles." And then we spent like 4 hours winding down, by which I mean we got the free massages that they had for bicyclers. And we went to the wine place and had a wine tasting. Like, here's money, give us a cup, and then give us tiny amounts of wine over and over. And we will talk about those tiny amounts of wine. As if we knew anything about tiny amounts of wine. Like, "Ooh, that one's very dry. It's liquid. For God's sakes, it's liquid. I don't know how wine can be dry. If wine were dry, you wouldn't be drinking it." Overall, a very nice day for the bike ride thing. I do recommend it if you have any ability to bike at all. Don't do the 100. Because I saw my friend Mark when he got back, and he did not look good. He looked tired. He's like, "Yeah, that was tough." And I'm like, "You have thighs of steel." He's like, "Well, I actually did 89 miles. And I'm like, "What, you flew the extra 11? He's like, "No, I got to the point where you're supposed to turn, and I went, I'm not going to do 100. I'm like, "If you can't do 100, no one could do 100. He's like, "Oh yeah, lots of people did 100. I mean, one guy got back in like a little over 5 hours. And I'm like, I hate that guy. Oh, well, here we go. Oh, and one more thing. I'm going to mention this from the slides. Someone at work said, "So you slept in the room with your sister-in-law?" And I'm like, "Yeah." They're like, "That's a little weird." And I'm like, "What do you expect?" They're like, "Well, I don't know. I mean..." And so I was like, "You expected hanky-panky?" And they're like, "It's my sister-in-law, for God's sakes." They're like, "Oh, I don't know." Okay, and then I typed that into the iPad, you know, hanky-panky, to briefly mention it, and it changed it to hanky-panicky. Okay, spelling correction. And then I kept it, because hanky-panicky is what would have happened. Okay, it's just... Okay, a lot of people have asked me, "Keith, what's the deal with this oil spill?" And by oil spill, we mean the oil drilling platform explosion, which destroyed lots of things. So we're in the Gulf of Mexico, which I don't know why it's called that. It could be the Gulf of the South American states or something. It's that thing near Florida, the watery part. And a while ago, I guess they discovered there was oil down there, and then they thought we should drill and bring that oil up here, because it ain't doing anybody any good down there, underground, and up here it would do us a lot of good. Because we love oil. A lot, apparently, because we have really big trucks that need a lot of it. And then, so they drilled all the oil that was close to the surface out, and then they went, "Well, there's oil in a little deeper water. I bet maybe we could drill for that too." And then they went and drilled all of that up. And now we have reached the point in human society where we are drilling down a mile underwater to get to the bottom, to drill down further to get to the water, or to get to the oil, which is, God knows how far down it is. This is how desperate we have become. We're willing to drill a mile underwater to get this oil out. And then, while we're drilling for it, the thing will explode, And then apparently if you've got a drill stuck in the bottom of the ocean, oil's just going to come out. And I'm like, well, what? Why wouldn't the oil just always be coming out? Like if you got oil really deep, you know, the oil's deep underground, and I guess we have drilled down to get to it, and now it's going to come out forever. So apparently we got a hole in the earth, and there's oil coming out of the hole, and we gotta fix it. Otherwise, all the oil underground is going to come out, and we're going to have none left. Because I think the turtles eat it or something, because they're dying. Here we go, random crap, because I got 2 minutes left. Cyst in finger. Okay, the other day I went to the doctor, because my finger's been kind of tender, and I can feel something in there that's a little bit weird. And she kind of went... She's like, I'm going to get an x-ray. And then she left right away. And I'm like, well, that's never good. Okay, when a doctor sees you, says 5 or 6 cryptic words, and rushes off, they're probably going to arrange a surgical suite or something. But then a nice man came over and said, yeah, we want to take some x-rays. And then they took some x-rays. No superpowers developed. I am continuing to be disappointed with medical science. And then they took me back to my room, and 5 minutes later, the woman came back in and said, yeah, the radiologist looked at it. There's nothing wrong with your finger. It's just a ganglious cyst. And I'm like, great. I mean, out of all the other crap that keeps going wrong with me, now I got cysts in my fingers. And she's like, well, it might go away. I'm like, well, that's good news, I guess, if it does go away. She's like, or sometimes you can pop them. And I'm like, what? She's like, yeah, you just press on it really hard, and sometimes it'll just kind of pop and then dissolve. If they're closer to the surface, sometimes we hit them with a hammer. I'm like, I should have sprung for the high-end health plan, shouldn't I? I should have sprung for the we could do something better than hitting your cysts with a hammer plan. I mean, this is all the further we've gotten. Just look, that's wrong. Let's hit it with a hammer. I've hit my hand with a hammer before. It didn't fix things. It made them worse. I think I'm out of time. So we'll see y'all in a month next time. I'll keep the slides because I only got like halfway through them. I didn't even get anywhere near halfway through them. Here we go. I'll just mention this for the credits because by next month it'll be out of date, okay? For God's sakes, if you're a terrorist, you should be watching Mythbusters. Okay? If you had any familiarity with Mythbusters at all, you would realize that 4 propane tanks and a couple M80s is not going to explode fantastically. It is just going to make terrorists like how an 8-year-old thinks a bomb works. Like we put some explosive stuff near some large metal containers, and then we drive it over a cliff, and immediately it'll explode fabulously. And then they're like, well, let's try and get a car to explode in midair. And they drive a car over a cliff, and it just goes, boom. And then all the gasoline in the car will run on the